Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Carney, and welcome to a new series here on Club at 22 called Club Interview. This series will be guests from any area really to do with Rangers. We'll learn about them as a person, learn about them as a professional, and get their thoughts on all things Glasgow Rangers. I'm delighted to introduce the first guest of this series is writer and author Jeff Holmes. Jeff, welcome to Club at 22, and thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure, Scott. Absolutely my pleasure.
So, Jeff, for people listening and our listeners kind of listening in and maybe have not heard of you as such, can I give us kind of a brief bit about yourself and your kind of career so far?
Always interested in writing. Didn't really kind of fell away from it after school and was in STV for 25 years as a stagehand and a prop man and all these things. And I think it was while I was at STV, I got chatting to somebody, one of my colleagues whose daughter worked at the Sun, and sometimes it's who you know. And I started doing Speedway for the Sun, just to pick the writing back up again, and really enjoyed that. And kind of went all over Britain watching Glasgow Tigers, and my son was involved in it as well. But been a Rangers fan since I was 10 years old, so it was always football I was wanting to really get into. And then I seen a wee gap in the Sun to cover matches, and I started covering matches, third division matches for them, junior stuff as well for the Evening Times, and then started doing the higher up leagues and some Premiership stuff for the Sun, and then I'd moved down to River City for 6 or 7 years, working after I left STV. I decided to leave there. I was going to try and get into newspapers full time, put in for a job in one of the regional papers, didn't get it. Basically because I had no experience ever working in a newspaper before, but I just always loved writing. And then I got a job at the Paisley Express. I was there for about 7 or 8 years, thoroughly enjoyed it. Meanwhile, we get kind of taken over by a Daily Record, and they shut the offices in Paisley, and we all moved to the Daily Record. So I then started covering games for the Daily Record and the Sunday Mail, and then doing a lot of sports stuff for them and stuff. So it was a good grounding, and all roads kind of led to what I'm doing now is writing books, which I really love, Scott. It's started off just kind of self-published one, a wee local book now. So I'm also involved at Maryhill Juniors. So I did a wee book about Maryhill Juniors. But then I think the first one I did in Rangers was Jock Wallace. It was a Jock Wallace book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And after that, it was just no turning back. It was just a case of what's next. And it's always been a case of you thoroughly enjoy the one you're writing, and research was the best part of it for me. And then all of a sudden it's what's next, and there's always a next with a club our size.
Always a next. It's a vast history to get stuck into. As I say, I once I got a copy of your book, Just Champion, which we're about to come on to. I looked back and I'd noticed that the books that you had wrote, and I was like, I've heard of that book. As I say, I'm not really a bookworm. I'm not going to pretend that I am. I don't really read books very much, but I seen that you did Jock Wallace, you did Mark Walters, you done Marco Negri as well. So there's some catalogue there, and obviously writing about Rangers it's a bug for you now, really.
Absolutely. Aye, the Jock Wallace one was really interesting because it was kind of personal to me, because when I worked in STV and I was a young lad, I used to collect autographs, and I remember when the security men used to always tell me who was coming in, and there'd be all sorts in those days in the 70s and 80s. There was all sorts of Hollywood stars coming in to STV all the time, because they were the big station then. They were attracting a lot of top names. But one day he told me that Rangers were coming in the next day, and I think it was roughly about 1978. He said Rangers are coming in the next day, and I missed them. I got there, and he said to me, I got there on my autograph book after my gaffer had kept me. Gaffer was a Celtic fan, had kept me back doing something else, and I got there, and he says, "Oh, they're on the conference room," and I was 17. He says, "Go on in and get their autographs," and I was far too shy and embarrassed, to do it. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
They were in to watch a European game. They did that quite often. Rangers and Celtic would do that. They would hire the conference room out, and they would get a video sent over for wherever and watch future European opponents. So just at that point, this taxi comes up to the front door at STV, screeches to a halt, and Jock Wallace runs out, and I'm like, "Oh, this Jock Wallace manager," and I get this really quick dilemma, and I've got a quick decision to make, because he's about 20 yards away. He's running at speed. Does a 17-year-old boy stop Jock Wallace in his tracks and ask him for his autograph? Or does he just stand out of the way and let him breeze past? I don't know where I get the confidence from, but I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Wallace, can I have your autograph?" And he stopped, it was a cartoon putting the brakes on, and he screeched to a halt. And he went, "Of course, son, of course." And he stopped inside the autograph, and then he says to me, "Did you get the rest of the players?" I went, "I'm late, I'm never late." And he was going on. And I said, "Sadly, I missed him." I said, "I was working." He went, "Well, come on and we'll go in." He took me into the conference room.
Oh, amazing.
And I know 17 sometimes he's quite old nowadays, but then I was from Maryhill, and I'd barely ever been out of Maryhill when I started working at STV. So I wasn't very worldly and experienced. So he took me in, and the players were Bobby Russell and Davy Cooper and Colin Jackson, just all these guys that I'd grown up watching. Well, I'd been watching them since 1970, and he just said, "Right, okay," he says, "Sorry I'm late, lads," he says, "but before we start watching this video of our opponents, sign this. What's your name, son?" I says, "Jeff, sign Jeff's autograph book, or you're getting fined." And I get everybody's autograph, and it was just, honestly, for a kid, for a teenager, it was just fantastic, because these were my heroes, John Gregg, all these guys. So I remember that when I was researching the Jock Wallace books, I made the introduction to the book, that wee story, just to give my association with it. And then one of Jock's son, John, got in touch with me just about a month before I was due to go to the publisher, and he said, "I hear you're writing a book about my dad." And I was like, "Aye, that's right, aye. Have you any photographs?" I says, "No." He says, "Well, I can send you some family photographs." And he sent me all these photographs of his dad in the army and stuff.
Amazing.
It was fantastic. And then I became lifelong friends with the family. And young John, the grandson, he comes over. They're in Spain, but young John's studying in Southampton at the moment. But they come over when they can for games and stuff. They're massive Rangers fans, and young John's been to games, and John Gilligan's offered to get him tickets in the seats in the director's box, and he's like, "No, I want to go in with the Union Bears and stuff." So they've got it in their heart, and it's been passed down in generations. So that was a particularly poignant book for me because of the subject, and obviously Rangers. Yeah. And another thing, I was working in the Paisley Express at the time. This isn't getting out, is it? Only kidding. I was working in the Paisley Express at the time, and we were based in the Daily Record. And I got a phone call from a mate of mine, Bobby Roddy, and he says to me, "Get yourself." I was researching the Jock Wallace book at the time. In fact, I was nearly. I was writing the book. I was just about finished writing it. He says, "Get yourself to the Hilton Hotel. Where are you the now?" And I says, "I'm in the Daily Record." He says, "Well, you're not far. Get yourself to." I says, "I can't just get up off my desk." And so I feigned the worst toothache you've ever seen in my life, and I was the most terrible actor. And the editor says to me, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, toothache's just come on. It's really, really bad." I still don't know why I have to go to the Hilton Hotel. But he says, he says, "You better, where's your dentist?" And I says, "Paisley." And he says, "Right, well, you better go." I says, "Right, okay." I says, and I'm making all these mad noises. So I walks over to the Hilton Hotel, and Bobby says, "Right, come on, you come up on the second, third floor." And it was every one of the Barcelona Bears signing memorabilia. And Bobby had organised for me to interview them all. And I think obviously they played a big part in Jock's time at Rangers. And I'd interviewed Willie Johnson and Colin Jackson beforehand, but the rest of them were there: Sandy Jardine, John Gregg, Alfie Conn, all these guys. So, and Colin Jackson's wife, Pam, she was fantastic. She brought, "Who do you want now, Jeff?" And I said, "Oh, give me Ali Donald, give me Tommy McLean." And she would bring them all out one by one, and they would sit and get interviewed. And then there was only one guy I hadn't interviewed. Sandy Jardine was great as well. I mean, Sandy was struggling at the time, but he was such a gentleman. And so there's only one person I hadn't interviewed, and that was John Gregg. And John Gregg, he's John Gregg, right? So
yes, very much so.
Bobby says, "Aye." So Bobby says, "Pam, where's Greggy?" And she says, "He's in there somewhere, but." He says, "Jeff's just waiting to speak to him, and that's it." And Pam says, "I think he knows that." Like getting interviewed. So Bobby had made a point of phoning Greggy the night before and saying, "Will you be okay with this, John? Because just to give him his place as the greatest ever Ranger." So next minute, I'm talking to Pam and Bobby, and John Gregg sneaks out. And Bobby shouts, "John, John, where you going? He went, I'm getting home. And he went, you said you would speak to Jeff about Jock Wallace. I can't remember anything about Jock Wallace. That was so long ago. So I thought, here we go. I'm not going to, this is the one interview I really wanted. So he says, and he stopped in his tracks. And he says, I've got my wee dictaphone ready. And he says, I'm no speak. I said, I don't remember it. So he kind of was walking over, we were walking towards him as he'd stopped, and he was speaking. And I says to him, I says, that's fine, John. I says, I respect your wishes, not a problem. And Bobby's saying, but John, I says, Bobby, it's fine, honestly. And hadn't been a journalist for years, there's ways to get around these things. And I kind of discreetly put my dictaphone on, and I says to him, can you just answer me one question? And he says, aye, what is it? I says, it was reported in the press that when we won the Scottish Cup in '78, I think it was, I says, and it completed the treble. I says, you walked back into the dressing room and threw the cup at Jock Wallace and says, there you go, that's what you wanted. And he laughed and he went, aye. And him being a goalkeeper, he dropped it. And so then I says to him, so you must have had a good relationship with Jock then, to be able to do something like that. He went, I had a great relationship with him and he brought us a lot of success. And before he knew it, I'd interviewed him for 10 minutes, which was absolutely fine for me. I got exactly what I wanted. Then he turns around and says, hey, honestly, he says, there's no point in this interview because I can't remember it. And I says, that's fine, John. I says, that's fine. I says, but you wouldn't mind if I just used some of the stuff we were wee chat. He went, if it's helpful, that's great. He says,
brilliant.
And Bobby says, and I gave Bobby the wink, and Bobby says, that's great, John, thanks very much. And he says, Bobby, I'm sorry I let you down. And he went, no, it's fine. Honestly, it's fine. And I'm away happy with all these, with 9 or 10 interviews for these absolute icons of my upbringing. So
you literally.
I also tracked down a lot of other stuff, Scott. Sorry, Scott. I tracked down a lot of other people. Like my daughter was working in a sports centre in Airdrie, and there was a guy that had played under Jock Wallace at Leicester. And she knew him well, but didn't know this. And she said, my dad's writing a book about Jock Wallace. And he says, I played under Jock Wallace at Leicester. Seriously? So it was great to interview guys like that that had never been interviewed before for the book. And I interviewed about 20, 30 people for it, from all over the whole sort of Jock's Berwick time at Berwick. He even got somebody for his time at Hereford, so it was...
Well, that's amazing.
It was great.
The story that you're telling there is literally like every fan's dream. It really is. It's like every fan's dream, and especially one bit resonated with me is when you said that you'd seen Jock Wallace. I very unexpectedly, I didn't meet Walter Smith, but Walter Smith is that kind of guy to me at my age. And I literally, where I was working, I walked round the corner, still smoking at the time. I'd walked round the corner. It was a really sunny day. There was this guy walking towards me, and he had a big brown trench coat on with a briefcase, and then there was a guy next to him with a laptop in his hand, and he's frantically typing away. And I was like, that's not something you see every day in the centre of Glasgow. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. It was really sunny, and he got about 5 foot away from him, and he just lifted his head, and it was Walter Smith. And he just went, all right, son. And I couldn't speak. I didn't even know what to say, and I let him walk away. And then I got back inside and told the boys and walk. I was like, I've not just met Walter Smith. He said all right to me, and he walked away. And I was just so starstruck. Do you know what I mean? I was just like, because he's like an icon to me. So yeah, I know exactly what you were going through in terms of when you seen Jock. But it's an incredible story, especially getting in to meet all the Barca Bears and getting an interview all them. That's absolutely tremendous. So, Jeff, we'll move on to the reason I actually reached out for you to come on the podcast, and it was Jamie, one of the other lads on the podcast, very kindly got a copy of the book Just Champion in June. So, as a good chat show host, mate, I'm going to hold up a copy of it so people can see it. For people watching this on YouTube, it's a really great book. Some of the stories are very interesting. Before we get into it and give away too many spoilers, what was the main thought behind the book, Jeff, and why did you choose to have a number of stories as the format of the book, as well as linking kind of each story to a game?
Kind of evolved over a period of time. Obviously, I was always going to do something when we won when we got the 55th title, but I wanted to do something with Connor Goldson. Connor's a pal of my publisher. He's my publisher's a guy called Paul Camlin, who was the head of marketing, the head of communications down at Brighton Football Club. So he knew Connor when he played there. And I remember when Connor came to Rangers, he texted me, a few days before everybody else knew, and he told me he was coming. Told me he's a really good player, and had only been kept out because of the guy Dunk and somebody called Duffy. And I says, right, okay, I've heard of the guy Dunk. So he said to me, he says, how do you fancy doing something with Connor? for the league. I says, aye, but obviously, unless we didn't want it out till Christmas, we would have to start early. So he said, how about doing a diary of the season, with Connor Golson, because it looks like Connor's going to go through. This is sort of mid-January. He says, barring injury, it looks like Connor's going to go through and play every game, hopefully. So I said, aye, okay. So we approached. He texted Connor, and Connor said he was fine, mate. Love to do it. He says, but I'll need to get it cleared by Ross Wilson, who kind of runs the Rangers World. And Ross said no. And to be honest, I wasn't massively surprised, because if you get some outsider coming to you and saying, let's write about winning the league, and it's only mid-January, end of January, I can understand why nobody would want to tempt fate. When you've got a manager that's preaching one game at a time mantra, they're not just suddenly going to. But, we'd all have been kept hush-hush, and I think even then we all knew even though we were all really nervous, we knew we were going to win the league. But anyway, they didn't want to do it, and that was fine, and I completely understood. So I said to the publisher, look, I should really just start getting on with it and getting things done, because if I don't get it done, we're not going to get it out. We're not going to get it out until a few months after the season, and want to get it out as soon as possible after the season's finished. So he said to me, well, why don't you pick 25 games, 25 key games? He went, some of them won't have happened yet, but meanwhile you could be going and getting on with the other games. He says, and write about 25 key games. And I said, no, that would blow the pants off me. Just talking about games that we've already all seen and spoke about, and in podcasts and on Twitter and all these meetings. So it didn't excite me at all. And then I thought, this book should be more a celebration of what we've achieved rather than the way we've achieved it. It's important the way we've achieved it, and obviously to go through the whole league season unbeaten was phenomenal and beyond our wildest dreams. But I thought, so what we should do is so I spoke to the publisher, and we both kind of come up with this idea that maybe we should ask a couple of ex-players and ex-coaches and stuff. And I thought, I'm still not really too interested, to be honest, because I don't want to just write a dry account of games. It just bore me. So we decided that we would speak to a whole range of people, and people like my grandson, who's 16, who's season ticket holder, but who's never seen Rangers win the top title because of his age. He kind of speaks for a whole generation of kids that had never seen us win it, but who'd been there for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And then we started thinking, let's speak to as an eclectic mix of people as possible, and even spoke to the ambassador, who was noted for playing Rangers tunes on the piano, the ambassador to Portugal, who was brilliant. So we ended up getting some players, and I got some players, and I got some ex-managers, and Sati that owns the restaurant and stuff like that, and Jock Wallace's grandson, and just a lot of different people. Chris, who did the tours at Ibrox. And then I spoke to John Gilligan, because John had been kind enough to do a foreword for me for a book I wrote about the 1992-93 season, I think it was. And he did the foreword for that, which was great. And John's a massive Rangers fan, as everybody knows. But I wanted to speak to John a bit more in depth and just get his feelings and how did he become a Ranger, because we've all got a story. I mean, my dad was a Partick Thistle fan. I was born in Maryhill. My whole family are Partick Thistle, but I'm the only Rangers fan. So it's not really been handed down to me, and that's something I wish it had been handed down through generations, because it's a great thing to walk in the footsteps of your ancestors. But so John Gilligan was fantastic. But then when I spoke to John, and John said I had to speak about the 2015 EGM. And John said that it was a great victory for everybody involved, but it was obviously him and Paul Murray and Dave King that fronted it. And John says to me, he says, if we hadn't won that EGM, he says, Mike Ashley was standing there with a loan. I think it was £5 million loan, and he was going to take Ibrox and Murray Park and these things. And it just beyond.
It doesn't bear thinking about that. It really doesn't bear thinking about something like that happening. I'm sorry for jumping in there. I'll stop you there, because the Three Bears, the part of the book that I was reading, it's amazing how much you kind of you don't take it for granted as such, but it was like, okay, that happened and we moved on quite quickly and we started to rebuild the club. Through the words that Dave King, Paul Murray, John Gilligan said, you could feel the tension in them that they had the day before that AGM, and what they were trying to go through, and what what would have happened with our club if this wasn't successful? It really doesn't bear thinking about. But they 3-1s for me when I read the three stories in the book, I get quite emotional because the thought of not having Rangers in my life, I can't move on. I can't be another supporter of another team. It's never going to happen. So I really did find it so interesting with the fact that they'd met the night before. They went to Sings to have something to eat, and that Dave King sitting with spreadsheets and all this kind of thing to make sure everyone's going to go his way, doing all his homework. I found that really fascinating.
So when I spoke to Sati Singh for the book, because Sati's a lifelong Rangers fan as well, and when I spoke to Sati and he'd said to me, I was in his restaurant and we were talking away, and he says to me, they had that just over there behind that curtain. That's where the meeting was that night. And I thought, that's fantastic. I said, we're actually sitting here. I think the Founders Trail in years to come will include things like that in their tours, because it's actually it's a moment frozen in Rangers time. And it was after, and Sati says to me, have you spoke to Paul Murray? And I'd never met Paul Murray, and I think I'd met him at Matt Walter's book lunch, and that was about it briefly. And I said, no. He said, well, I'll put you on to Paul. He says, if you want to speak to Paul. And I said, well, that'd be great. And then once I get Paul, as you're talking about emotion there, Scott, Paul was really in this stuff to me, and I was hairs in the back of my neck were standing up. And I thought, God, it's just frightening to think, the day after the takeover, they went to Cowdenbeath and drew 0-0. Their Hearts had beaten 10-0 2 weeks before it, and you think, that's where we were at the time. But it could have got a lot worse. It could have got a lot worse. And after I'd spoken to John and Paul Murray, I thought I really need to speak to Dave King. And Sati again was good enough to put me in touch, and Dave King got right back to me, and we did a wee piece with Dave. And when I was doing the Zoom call with Paul Murray, he was in Portugal, and you could just feel it coming through. You could just feel his passion for the club. I didn't know an awful lot about Paul before I spoke to him. Just what everybody else knew, but he's just love for Rangers. It's just all consuming. It's just there, and I know we sometimes speak of the businessmen, and they're in football clubs for business reasons, but you just know these guys are there for the love of Rangers, and there but for the grace of God. If they hadn't been there, and would it have been somebody else? I don't know. Would it have been somebody else big and bold enough to take on Ashley, who had his claws into the club at the time, and the other guys. So it really was. I decided, and then the book then evolved again, and I thought, because Dave King says, without the 2015 EGM victory, there would have been no title this season. And it's, I know it's 6 years, but listen, I completely agree with him on that matter, because if they lose the EGM and Mike Ashley's waiting in the wings to come in, where does the club go from there, Scott? I don't know. But thankfully it went the other way, the right way.
Yeah, well, Ibrox, I think, would be called the Sports Direct Arena or something ridiculous like that. We would be unrecognisable to what we are, and it would have took away the absolute soul of our club. And I'd really say, I've never had the pleasure of meeting Dave King, Paul Murray, or John Gillingham for that matter to thank them. But they know how much this meant to all of us, and it really comes through when you're reading their stories, just what it meant to them as well as fans. And even a bit of Paul Murray, I think it was in Paul Murray's part, he was like, nobody knew how bad this was, and when they first sat down and they started going through everything, the club was in a dire way, and it was worse than they'd first kind of thought it was going to be as well. And then the story of them walking outside Argyle House and all the fans being there as well, I was honestly nearly in absolute tears just reading it, because it just means everything to them, and it meant everything to us. In terms of the way you did each story, did you meet everybody kind of individually? Did you do calls with every single person that wrote a story, or was it kind of sent to them to do and then send back to yourself to adapt to put in the book?
No, it was all either face to face. It was very difficult to meet face to face at the time I was doing the book.
Yeah,
it was all. I met a couple of people face to face. It was all either phone calls or Zoom conferences. No, the only guy that was Marco in Italy, and
you can't tell by the way it's wrote of that. You can't tell by the way it's wrote of that. It's brilliant.
I got in touch with him through Messenger. After I did his book, he invited my wife and I over to Bologna for a week, and we had a great time. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, at the hotel at Crack of Dawn. Wanted us to stay with him, but I said no, we want to stay in a hotel. At the hotel at Crack of Dawn, he picked me up and took me all these places, me and my wife. It was fantastic, it was great. So I've got a great relationship with him, and such a lovely guy. And when I said to him, Mark, we're going to contribute to the book, he went, sure. He went, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, ideally, I'd like to speak to you, and we'll talk about this and talk about that. I says, but here's what I want. If you want to write, because I know he's really quite keen in writing himself. So I just let him. He was the only one that wrote his own piece. But as for the rest, no, everybody was interviewed at one point.
Yeah,
it was great. And sometimes one interview follows on. I know a lot of these guys from all my time doing books anyway and stuff. But sometimes the interview just follows on. There was a couple of people, one or two people said no, but that's always going to be the case. But it just maybe wasn't the right time for them or whatever. But still, they did well, you know. And we got a good. I think we got a good mix of people.
Yeah, as you say, it was from ex-players, ex-board members and fans as well. And as I say, some of the fans you'd mentioned there as well, it was their first time seeing a league title, which still baffles me that can be the case, because I'm like, I don't believe I'm at the age yet where you shouldn't have seen 9 in a row and stuff like that. I remember I worked with a boy in a job, and we were talking about Rangers, and he's got a season ticket, I had a season ticket, I was brilliant, and we started talking, which one day I was like, who's the greatest player you've ever seen? And I can't remember who you mentioned when I was like, you know, no Laudrup. I was like, not Gascoigne. I grew up during 9 in a row. Do you know what I mean? So I seen all these players, and he's like, I never seen Laudrup or Gascoigne play for Rangers, and I couldn't get my head around it. I'm going, what do you mean you've never seen Laudrup and Gascoigne? Everybody's seen that. What are you talking about? So yes, to hear what it means to people that have just witnessed this for the first time, and imagine as a fan that this is the first title you see. This is arguably the most significant title that Rangers have ever won, and I mean, there's a wee bit of jealousy coming out of me really at that point. So I'm going, I've seen it. I've seen so much. I've been through so much, and for them to get their first title, it was honestly, it was just absolutely brilliant to read all the different stories. I can't recommend, and I'm not just saying it because Jeff is on, I can't recommend go getting yourself a copy of it, because it will bring a tear to a glass eye, that's for sure. One of those ex-players you did get in the book was the now late, obviously, Ali Dawson, who sadly passed away just last week. You had the pleasure of meeting him and working with him. What was he like as a man?
Absolute gentleman. I remember I used to run the Sandbank Rangers Supporters Club from Maryhill, and we used to get that was the days we used to go over to the Ibrox and wait for the players coming back from training at the Albion and ask them if they would come to your Player of the Year dance to present the trophies. And from that, and they were great. And from that, we progressed on to writing to the club, and then the player writing back to you and saying, you can come or you can't come. But Ali Dawson was up at one of them, and I was in STV, so I was really pal with Jim White. So Jim would get people for me to come up to their dances and stuff. And I remember Derek Johnson was a regular to see the pal up at the club in the 70s and 80s. And Ali Dawson came up a couple of times when I met him, and he was just an absolute gentleman. And then the next time I met him was on Glenn Michael's Cartoon Cavalcade Cup Final Special, Rangers v Dundee United. I think it was 1980. Somebody produced a photograph of myself and one of my colleagues, and Ali Dawson and Paul Hegarty. I think you'll not remember Cartoon Cavalcade, Scott.
No, I don't. It rings a bell, but I don't remember it.
Have you heard of Glenn Michael?
No.
Well, you need to Google Glenn Michael.
I know, I'll need to Google. I'm 33, so I probably just missed out on it.
It was probably the most popular kids show on STV at one point. Bear in mind, I started on STV in January 1977 when I was 16, and it had been going for a few years. And Glenn Michael, who was a big personality in it, a kind of actor that maybe perhaps not too unkind, but didn't make it as an actor, so he became a presenter and became a very popular presenter and took his road show out to places. And every year it was a weekly programme with Casper the Friendly Ghost and all that stuff. So every year they would do a cup final special, and Ali was in for that. And again, absolute gentleman. Then I was doing a book. I did 2 books. One was called 1986 Rangers Revolution. One was called The Season to the Cheerful 92-93. So, but the first one, Ali would have been in the 86 one. You see, he was in the kind of crossover between Souness. It's just such a philosophical guy. You would say, you know, I tried my best to get a deal under Graham Souness, but Graham obviously wanted to go a different way, and we parted company amicably. And I said, well, you know what? I've had 12 great years at Rangers, captain for 3 or 4 of them, lifted cups for Rangers, and it was just an absolute joy and pleasure to sit down with and chat to. And then when the book came out, I would take a copy of the book up to his work. He was working with kids on the street and helping them out, and we'd just sit and chat. And then I phoned him. I wanted to speak to him about this book, so I phoned him up, and we had a wee chat. And he said to me, I think this was January, February, and he says to me, and it just right away, no problem. What do you want to talk about, Jeff? I want to talk about Rangers win the league. Right, only problem is we've not won it yet. I says, I know, but we've got to kid on, we've won it, Ali, because it's got to come out in June the 1st. And he went, right, okay. So, no problem. Well, everybody was no problem. There was only one person who wanted me to go back and speak to him after we'd won it. Probably were 25 points in front. But Ali was great, and then interviewed him, did the whole interview. In fact, I was on the phone about an hour, and then he said to me after it, he says, I'm no well, Jeff. He says, I'm no well. He says, I'm just kind of keeping it to myself, keeping it quiet. I'm not putting anything on social media. He says, my wife and my daughters are looking after me, and I'm hoping that such and such will, help me. And he went, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. He went, and it was just, honestly, it makes me very emotional. But he was just such a lovely guy.
Yeah, quite.
And then when the book came out, I phoned him. I heard he was, downhill a bit. I phoned him because I wanted to get a book through to him, to his house and give him it. I had to leave a message on the phone, and obviously he never got back to me because he was quite unwell at the time. But just one guy that I don't think anybody could have a bad word to say about Ali Dawson. One guy that he'll tell you himself, he was fortunate enough to play for Rangers. He was a good player. He was a really steady player. He played a number of positions at the back. Scored a few goals for Rangers. Told you he said the first one he scored was it looked like a cross, but it ended up in the back of the net, and he said he meant it. Several people say he didn't, but when in the back of the net, he scored for Rangers. He lifted cups for Rangers. He played hundreds of games for Rangers. He was there for 12 years. An absolute legend, honestly, an absolute legend. And I know this one's a legend and that one's a legend, but legend. The word legend should be kept by for guys like Ali Dawson. Just such a lovely, lovely man.
Very well said, Jeff. I definitely couldn't have said it any better than that, mate. That's absolutely tremendous, and we've said it before, but obviously we all pass on our condolences to his family and friends. There's obviously not a really easy way to move on for something like that. I just thought it was important, mate, because I know you had a relationship with him that we did speak about him. So this is going to be quite a difficult one, and it's probably quite an unfair question I'm just about to ask you, to be honest, Jeff. What is your favourite story in the book?
Can't say my grandsons, can I? No.
Yeah, we can if you want.
There's quite a few. Do you know one of the guys I'm one of these people that always likes learning about Rangers, which is why I'm now developed a real interest for the history going way back. And one of the stories was by a chap called Chris Mayhead, who's the tour guide at Rangers. And I always remember Chris I hardly even knew Chris, and I rocked up one day with two of my wife's relations from Australia. They hadn't booked a tour, and I went in. It was a Sunday, and Chris was doing the tour, and he saw me at the front door, and we kind of knew each other a wee bit. And he came over and he shook my hand, and he says, I told him the predicament. I said, look, I've just turned up in the off chance. I don't expect anything, never expect anything. Like I said, but and I told him it was my wife's cousin and their partner from Australia, and he went, get them in, and they just went in, and he made a fuss of them, and it was just fantastic. And I knew Chris had grown up round the corner from Ibrox, and I knew that his dream was always to work for Rangers. And it wasn't just you hear that saying the Blazer chasers, but Chris was just probably the proudest guy ever when he pulled on that Blazer to do the tour. And his tours were exceptional because he cares about the club and because he loves the club with all his heart. And I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, I love Chris's stories about the wood panelling at Rangers and stuff. He's just such a keen Rangers man, like most of us. But he's managed to get in there and do his bit, and he's brought a lot of pleasure to so many people. We talk about the pleasure that guys like Gascoigne and Laudrup and Alan McCoy bring to people, David Cooper, but Chris in his own way does the same thing, and he's just. One of my things is going and tours of football grounds. I even went to hijack splits in Croatia. I didn't even clue what the guy was talking about. But that was a great. And I've been in a few tours in down south where I thought, that was okay. Did Anfield a couple of weeks ago. Quite enjoyed it. Man United I thought was good as well. Arsenal used to do, but Chris's tours at Rangers were just, God, they're from the heart, and this guy's a Rangers man. He's not in here doing this for a wage. He's in here to do it because he's a Rangers man. So I enjoyed that story, and a lot of people seem to enjoy that one as well. I really enjoyed Saki Singh because Saki he just makes me laugh every time I speak to him, and his stories about calling his boys after Oleg Kuznetsov and excuse me, Mark Walters is just phenomenal, but I thought everybody that interviewed brought something, and John Gilligan's as well saying to me that they'd been saving up to get engaged, and then Rangers qualified for the European Cup Winners' Cup final, and he said, "Sorry, darling, something's got to give." I wouldn't have expected any less, to be honest.
No,
said,
I know.
I said, "Did you part company?" Then he went, "No, we're still." Well, I better tell him how that ends that story. But
exactly.
That was a good one as well. I enjoyed speaking. I enjoyed speaking to everybody. Alec McLeish was another gentleman. Just an absolute gentleman. Spoke with. You could feel his voice cracking when he was speaking to the Helicopter Sunday. It obviously meant so much to him, and obviously still means so much to him. People will say he played for Aberdeen for years, and my wife absolutely hated him, and I hated him myself. But obviously a Rangers man, brought up a Rangers man, and still a Rangers man with a wee bit of red in the middle.
Yes, I think he's. You can feel it with Big Ek when he's talking about it, and I mean that's a massive big star in his CV, Helicopter Sunday. So, where can people get the book, Jeff? Obviously, I'll leave all the details in the link below, but just in case people don't want to look, where can they get your stuff?
People can get it from all the usual places like W.H. Smith and Waterstones and Amazon and that, but they can get it from me direct, and they get a wee bookmark from me as well, which. Hang on a second. Oh, I don't have one of the official bookmarks, but they will get one. I've got one. I think I've got about 10, 11 left. So if people want to get in touch with me by email, it's jeff.holmes4@btinternet.com or through Twitter at jefh1960.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, I'll leave all the details as well in the description for this show. So before we move on and talk about Rangers now and the upcoming season and whatever else have you, what's next for you? What you're working on just now? What's coming?
Well, for about the last year and a half, on and off, I've been researching Rangers' great team of 1898, 1899. The league season that year should have been just 1898, but because a couple of games were drawn, it's sort of spilled over into 1899 because the makeup of the season then was the Scottish League fixtures in the second half of 1898, and then the Scottish Cup and the Glasgow League in 1899. But as I say, there was a wee bit of a spillover, but that's a phenomenal era from my point of view. It's only sort of 27 years after they were formed in March 1872, and it's a great era, and I like getting to. We've all heard a lot of people have heard like Nick Smith and Alex Smith, two of the greatest Rangers ever. One's a right back, one's an outside left from Darvel, no relation. And Jock Drummond and Matt Dickey, the goalie, and John McPherson, and we could go through R.C. Hamilton. Don't know where they got these initials, but we could go through them forever. But I wanted to get to know the people. I wanted to get to know the people about where they were born, how they were brought up, and where they lived, and what kind of money were they getting in those days, what kind of kudos were they getting, was a Rangers player getting. I wanted to try and answer all these questions, and it's been quite difficult, but it's been really good fun. And I feel as if they've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles and match reports. I feel as if they played a completely different style in those days, Scott. I mean, not just formation, but just a completely different style. But Rangers had they won the league. That's the year they won the league and won every league match, which is still the only club in Britain ever to achieve it. And the thing is, the season before it, Celtic became the first club to go through the season unbeaten. So with the Rangers do the next season, they just win every league match, don't they? So they got to every cup final and they won the league by winning every game. And then they went on and won the league for 4 years in a row, which Celtic hadn't done for So it's good.
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating.
Better than they're invincible.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a fascinating time when you go back and you read these articles about the way football used to be played, and the game's almost unrecognisable really now compared to what we play now, and the amount of times draws would lead to another 4 or 5 games because you would just keep drawing with a team and it would just seem to go on and on forever. It was an incredible time, so I look forward to seeing that. As I say, it really is.
You know, it was fixed. It was in those days. I mean, in those days, there is real evidence to show that Rangers and Celtic were in cahoots and used to draw matches deliberately so they could get replays, and only not in the league, only in the cup matches. Because at that time, for some Rangers home games, they were getting 3,000 and 4,000 for home matches. But when they played Celtic, they'd be 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. And it was a lot of money in these days because of the little amount of fans that were coming to the normal league games. These games were so important, and then Rangers obviously became a limited liability company that year as well. So they had to then they were answerable to shareholders and stuff, and they also built the new Ibrox. So it was quite interesting. But they only took a 10-year lease out in the new Ibrox, so I don't know what they were thinking at that point. But it's a fascinating period in the history. But they were in it to make money in those days as well. But there's much more than that, Scott. As you say, there's an awful. That's just an aside. There's a lot more than that, and some of the personalities that played in those days were some of the players they reckon could have easily held their own in the game. In this day and age, maybe the fitness and all that might have been a wee bit different. But Drummond was still playing then and still playing with a bonnet.
That's brilliant, isn't it? It's so good. As well, I suppose in the parks, the pitches that we're playing on are not exactly going to be your kind of 5G pitches or whatever you get nowadays. It's basically a field with a few lines drawn on it. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, a different breed of men back then. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So, look forward to that. When can we expect it? Do you know? Have you got a plan of when you're going to release it?
Publisher wanted it for January, but I told them no chance. I need compromising the research and the quality, but. Now, the next year sometime maybe, hopefully.
Well, we'll look forward to it. So we'll move on to Rangers now, mate. The charge for 56 has begun. So I seen from your Twitter, you were at the game on Saturday, so was I. I was lucky enough to get a ticket. We got off to a good 3-0 win over Livy. What did you make of the game? What did you make of the return of the fans, return of seeing Rangers with your own 2 eyes again?
Well, it was great because, I mean, I tend to turn up for games win the 5 minutes to. I'm not one of these people that goes in 5 minutes after kick-off and everybody's got to stand up again. I like to get in before the game, but 5-10 minutes before the game. And then you speak to all your mates outside and stuff, and I'm a part of the collectors club and go and swap programmes and stuff. But we were told we had to be in at a certain time, and I'll always adhere to these things. So I was in about an hour before kick-off, and I actually enjoyed. I went in quite quick. It was me and my grandson, and I went in quite quick and chatting to people round about. But just seeing the crowd building up, it was just different class because it was. I don't know. Part of me just kind of took it in my stride and thought, "All right, here we go. This is." I was always look forward to every game, no matter who we're playing. But sadly, I don't think my expectations. I don't think Rangers lived up to my expectations of what I was hoping. On Saturday, I thought we were. I thought we were quite poor at times. I thought we were. And the guy, had a conversation with the guy next to me, and he says, "Oh, it's the first game of the season." And I said, "But that's what pre-season's for. Pre-season's to get us up and running. We've got a professional backroom team of about 100, and this pre-season's supposed to get us up and running, so we hit the ground running for the first league match. We've got Malmo, tomorrow night, isn't it? The first game in Sweden, and we've got that coming up." And so that's how I was a wee bit disappointed on Saturday. I know it's no the first team we're going to be playing regularly. A lot of the guys will be fringe players, but there was only to me there was only a couple that pass marks. I know we got 2 goals late on, which put a gloss in the scoreline, and they were down to 10 men when we got the third. But I like Dave. I thought Davis. I mean, probably was the oldest guy in the team Saturday. Davis was good, and I thought Kamara was excellent, and I thought Kent started really well, and Kent looked in the mood, and then all of a sudden they started forgetting to take the ball with him and missing it and stuff. But I thought he did a good first 15-20 minutes, and I thought Hadji, wee spells before he went off. That's a brutal tackle, wasn't it? Brutal tackle.
Yeah,
on him. But I thought he used skills as well. But now it was a bit. The one thing that disappointed me the most was Fashion Sakala, and I don't know if it's because he's perhaps playing in a different, playing in a maybe I don't know if that's his position. I don't know much about the guy, but we seem to the balls. You know, we're a team that likes to play wide and get down the flanks, and Bassey and Tava putting ball. I don't think that's the kind of player he is. It doesn't seem to go and attack balls in the box. He's not a Mark Hateley or Derek Johnson. I think he maybe needs balls over the top or balls to his feet, and for some reason they weren't doing that. So I was really disappointed because the guy didn't. It wasn't his fault, you know. He didn't get much of a chance because it's just the game just passed him by. Chased a few things and he looked rapid, but no, I was kind of disappointed overall, Scott. To be honest, great to be back. I think great to get the win. But
yeah, I think that what Sakala is that game doesn't suit him. A game like that, I think if Morelos, for example, was, I mean, I'm a wee bit shocked that it didn't start. To be honest, I'd said in the pub beforehand to the boys when we were predicting the team before it came out, I thought it would be Cedric Itten that would start over Sakala. And I think when you're playing against a team like Livingston that are going to try and frustrate you as much as they can and not let you get in behind and not let you get down the wings. That's not really Sakala's game. I don't think, as I say, that he does want something to chase onto. He has got pace to absolutely burn. There's no doubt about it. He is some speed. But I do agree with you to a certain extent about the first half. I thought we started really well. I think we scored. It got a wee bit. We dropped our pace, we dropped our intensity a wee bit. I don't think Rangers were in ever any danger to lose that match. And I suppose I think all we just have to kind of go on is if we get 3-0s like that for the rest of the season, every home match, I will happily take it. I will happily take it. That's the only thing you can really say. But yeah, as I say, I think it was just a wee bit. I think Gerrard obviously had his eye on tomorrow night as well, so you didn't see the main players. And in terms of Ryan Kent, mate, I just blame his beard. He needs to get shaved, that ridiculous bottom chin beard that he's got. Just get rid of it. Grow a proper one or just get rid of it. I'm saying that as a cheek, do you know what I mean? I've got a stupid beard as well, but anyway. So obviously you mentioned Malmo tomorrow night. What are you expecting? Obviously the draw was made earlier on today as well. If Rangers manage to get through, I don't like looking too far ahead myself, but it will be Olympiacos or Ludogorets that Rangers plays. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that another time. What are you expecting from Malmo tomorrow night?
I think with the benefit of the hindsight of the last 3 seasons under Gerrard and knowing how good we play in Europe and knowing that we almost play as good away from home as we do at home, apart from Sporting Braga. But we play well away. It doesn't seem to matter to this Rangers team and this Rangers management whether the game's at home or away, because we'll go and we'll win. We'll beat good teams away, Scott. You know that. I think Malmo were a very competent side. I think they'll be well organised and they'll be that usual well drilled Swedish team, and they won't be scared to maybe put the boot in now and again. But I don't see why they can't go and win. I know I said in Twitter this morning that, you know, let's get this one out of the way before I'm not even interested who they're playing the next round, because we can look at that after the second leg if we're through. Because this is such an important one, and you're right. Gerrard's had one eye on this match. I don't care what Andy says on Saturday with his team. He's said the same as you. I'm not going to slate Livy and say they're a pub team, but they're one of they've got to be one of the weakest teams in the Scottish Premier League, you know, because they're only very good, and they didn't really present it so much a threat. Probably the biggest threat was when Cav took his eye off the ball and the guy get in the second half. But I agree with you. I don't think we were ever going to lose the game on Saturday, and I think Gerrard knew that, and I think he's thinking, you know, one eye in Malmo, even though he would disagree, he would deny that. One eye in Malmo, and we can definitely go there and win. But I think it'll be really hard, because I think they're a good standard. You know, they're not a top standard team, but they're certainly not a lower standard team. They could have got maybe a easier draw there, but no, I think they're top of the Swedish league, aren't they? And they won it last year, so they'll be tough. But I'd expect McGregor and that to be back in tomorrow night, and a few others. But I think Barisic is going to miss out, isn't he? He's going to be injured, I think. Is he?
Oh, is he injured? Is he?
Well, it was injured for Saturday, wasn't he?
I hope not. I hope he's back. I've not seen too much of that, actually, to be honest. I'm not 100% sure. I hope he's back. I hope Barisic is back. I was just thinking he would.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, but I would agree with you. I think
Calvin Bassey's a good stand-in, but he's not a Barisic. I mean, he's a good defender. Big Bassey. I like him. I like his effort, and he's a stand-in centre half as well. But he's a left winger, and
Yeah, definitely. He's definitely no born a Barisic. So yeah, I'm the same. I think it's a tough draw, as I say. But everything, these are going to be tough draws to get yourself into Champions League. This is a step up from your Europa League. So it's definitely a tough tie. I think Rangers will at least get a draw tomorrow night and maybe fancy our chances back at Ibrox. I think that's the best we could maybe hope for, but you never know with this Rangers team. We could turn up and go out there and absolutely turn them over. Do you know what I mean? You really don't know how we turn up, and sometimes in Europe we just kind of change into a different beast altogether. So it'll be interesting to see. You see, I really am looking forward to it. I cannot wait for it. So in terms of the season coming up, Jeff, what's considered a success for you? Obviously, we expect to win the league. Well, Rangers fans, we always expect to win the league. But what else would you term a successful season?
I would love the Scottish Cup. I really would. I would love the Scottish. I'd love the league first and foremost. God, you want everything, don't you? To do well in Europe, to get into the group stages of the Champions League, to progress even further if we can, depending on who we get. The Scottish Cup, the League Cup, the League, the Scottish Lowland League for the B team, the Scottish Women's League, but not much more. I mean, we need something else. We need a bit of leeway to improve further for the following season. But seriously, if we can win the league again, that's always the big one, isn't it? And try and do well in Europe and maybe grab a cup. What about yourself, Scott? Are you thinking what you're saying?
100%, yeah. I think a double is a necessity, really, and I hate saying that because it sounds like I'm kind of being too kind of pressurised on it. But I think we have to win a cup. The Scottish Cup is the main one. I would love for Rangers to win the Scottish Cup, and I've said before there's every chance we could win the treble. There's every chance we couldn't win the treble. It's football. You never really know what's going to happen, but there's every chance we could win a treble. I've said it before. If Rangers get a treble this year and Gerrard gets us into the group stages of the Champions League, he could literally walk away from the job because he's going to achieve all he can really achieve up here. I never ever want Steven Gerrard to leave. I say it on pretty much every single podcast I ever do. I'm in love with Steven Gerrard. I want him to stay forever. He saved us, put it that way. He saved that the false 10 that they were claiming that they were going to win across the city. And I think, it could be, obviously, again, I don't want to really speak about them. They've had a disastrous start to their season on Saturday night, really not good for them at all. And I think the ball is firmly in our court. Obviously, there's a lot of front Rangers are going to be fighting on coming up. We've got Europe, we've got the Cups, we've got the league. So I think the league is a priority no matter what. If we don't win a cup, there will be people that grumble about not winning a cup, but if he gets into the Champions League group stages and wins the league, I'll be delighted. But I do think a double. Yeah, I would expect a double.
To me, it's about numbers now because the big thing was for me was the league, and we were all there 3 years ago in the enclosure when Gerrard was announced, when he was unveiled as a manager, and you knew it was going to take time. Everybody knew it was going to take time. I think we should maybe, we looked at times as if we were going to do it a wee bit quicker, but there was never any pressure on the guy, and he won the league for his last season, and everybody's delighted. But then you're getting the Celtic fans coming onto Twitter and saying, one trophy out of 9 is no great, is it? And then when you look at it that way, you think, right, come on, Stevie, let's get the numbers up. Let's get the numbers up. Let's get adding to these trophies and get 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And but no, I'm just delighted with the way things are going at the moment. There's absolutely no complaints at all because we've got a great. You've just said about the challenges that lie ahead, but we've got a great squad. We've got a good squad, a really good squad. We've got covered in virtually every position. We've got guys going out on loan and stuff. We might still even bring another 1 or 2 in. Well, we've got to be really happy with the way things are going. We didn't expect a massive overhaul of players this season. There's no need. So we're definitely heading in the right direction.
we are heading in the right direction then. Stevie Gerrard is at the helm and I'm right behind him, paddling away, trying to keep up with him. I can't wait to get properly into this season and to see us in Europe tomorrow night. I think that the business Rangers have done over the summer with the free transfers for John Lundstrom, who's on a pretty wage, I get that. Sakala was a free, Offerbaugh was a free. Obviously, he's got a wee bit of a heart issue. We've not seen him, but we've still not seen Alfredo Morelos back yet. And there's still more to come from this team. As I say, Saturday was just the start. I think it all proper kicks into gear tomorrow night when we get ourselves into Europe, try to get ourselves into the Champions League. And I can't wait for it. And it's an exciting time to be a Rangers fan, and it's the first time we could be able to say that in a long, long time, mate. So, yeah, that will do us, Jeff. All I can do is thank you very, very much for being the first guest on a club interview here on Club at 22. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and then hopefully we can have you on again sometime. So thank you very much.
Brilliant, Scott. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Sorry about the messing about with my internet signal and the links and stuff, but we got there in the end, and it was a great chat. And now we'll look forward to tomorrow night's match against Malmo.
Exactly. It's all. And the rest of the season. So this is all the world of podcasting, mate. This is what happens. People drop in and out and stuff. Things happen. It's just the way it goes. It's absolutely nothing to worry about at all, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. All the details for the book, Just Champion, they'll be in the bio for this show. And you can follow Jeff on Twitter at JeffH1960. So thank you to everyone who listened. Please leave a comment, give us your feedback on the pod if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, leave a wee 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, like and share anywhere that you can. It really does help support us. Thank you again to Jeff for coming on. We are Club at 22, the Champions Podcast, and I'll speak to you all next time. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Scott.